Garrick's hand closed around my wrist as the claiming blade flashed beneath my chin. "Kneel," he ordered. Firelight crawled across the silver edge, and the crowded ritual hall smelled of pine smoke, hot wax, and wolves waiting for obedience. My white ceremonial sleeve had torn beneath his fingers. Around us, elders lowered their eyes while Garrick Thorne drew me toward the black stone where an Omega's freedom could be erased with a single declaration. The drum stopped. In that silence, I heard the side door strike its frame in the wind. 12 yards away, unbarred. I looked at Garrick's polished boots, then at the blade. "You belong to this pack," he said. I twisted my wrist through the weakest space between his thumb and forefinger. His grip broke. Before anyone drew breath, I threw a brass candle stand into the brazier. Sparks burst across the floor, cloaks recoiled, and I ran. Someone shouted my name. Boots hammered behind me as I crossed the servants' corridor, ripped the ceremonial ribbon from my pale hair, and shouldered through the side door into darkness. Cold air cut through my thin dress. Snow swallowed my slippers to the ankles, but I kept moving, past the frozen well and beyond the last torch on the pack wall. "Bring her back." Garrick's voice rolled from the hall. "Alive." That final word followed me into the trees. Branches scraped my cheeks. Ice cracked under every hurried step, loud enough to betray me. So I abandoned the familiar northern trail and descended through a ravine where cedar roots twisted above the ground like knotted fingers. The claiming bells began behind me. 1, 2, 3. They were not celebrating now. They were calling the hunters. I tore strips from my hem and tied them around my slippers for traction, then rubbed crushed pine needles along my wrists and throat to confuse my scent. The resin stung the raw skin Garrick had left there. By the time the moon reached the treetops, the warm lights of the settlement had vanished. So had the bells. That frightened me more. Silence meant they had entered the forest. I climbed nearly 4 miles before the cabin emerged between the firs, its roof sagging beneath snow and one shutter hanging crooked over a black window. I knew the place from childhood warnings. It had belonged to a boundary keeper who disappeared years ago, and no pack patrol came this far west anymore. At least, none were supposed to. The front door resisted until I drove my shoulder against it. Rottenwood groaned. Stale air breathed over me, thick with dust, damp stone, and old ash. I slipped inside, dragged a broken table across the entrance, and stood listening while my pulse thudded against my ribs. No pursuit. Only the whisper of fir branches against the roof. Moonlight leaked through gaps in the walls, revealing a narrow cot, a cold hearth, and shelves furred with cobwebs. I pressed both palms against the rough door. By fleeing, I had surrendered my room, my pack name, and any protection their law had ever promised me. If Garrick found me now, no elder would pretend I still possessed the right to refuse him. "Then he won't find me," I whispered, my breath clouded in the freezing room. I crossed to the hearth and knelt, reaching toward the ash for anything dry enough to burn. My fingers stopped inches above it. Beneath the gray dust lay a narrow bed of coals, still warm. Someone had been inside the abandoned cabin before me. A cedar log rolled softly against the hearthstones, shedding a curl of fragrant bark. The wood was dry, too dry for a cabin whose roof leaked and whose windows wore years of grime. I brushed ash from my fingertips and followed the faint amber glow. 6 split logs stood beside the fireplace in a careful stack, their pale cuts fresh enough to release beads of sap. Whoever had tended the coals had planned to return. I took one log anyway. Heat mattered more than permission now. Flames rose with a low crackle, warming my palms while resin sweetened the stale air. Light pushed into the corners, revealing boot marks near the cot and a wool blanket folded squarely upon it. Nothing belonged in this ruin, yet each object had been placed with deliberate care. The cabin no longer felt forgotten. It felt temporarily empty. I pulled a rusted skinning knife from a drawer and tested its edge against my thumb. Dull but solid. Then a shadow moved across the window. I dropped beside the wall, knife raised. Only a fir branch scraped the shutter, tapping the wood with the slow rhythm of fingernails. Beyond the cloudy glass, snow reflected the moon in strips of blue-white light. I waited until the branch lifted again, then eased toward the back door. If the cabin's occupant returned, I needed another way out. The warped door opened 3 inches before packed snow stopped it. Cold air slid across my ankles. I shoved harder and squeezed through sideways, keeping the knife close to my ribs. The clearing lay still. No lanterns, no voices. But around the cabin, deep prints punctured the snow. They were wolf tracks, larger than any I had seen near Garrick's territory, each paw nearly as broad as my open hand. The trail circled the walls once, passed beneath every window, then vanished among the dark firs. This was not a wandering animal. It had inspected the cabin. A metallic scent touched the air beneath the pine. Blood, fresh enough that my wolf stirred uneasily under my skin. I backed inside, forced the door shut, and wedged a chair beneath its iron latch. The table still blocked the front entrance. I tightened my grip on the knife and watched the windows while the fire snapped behind me. Minutes stretched. Meltwater ticked from the roof into a tin cup. Smoke carried cedar and old soot through the room, but the blood scent strengthened until even the burning resin could not hide it. Then came 3 measured knocks. Not claws, knuckles. The table trembled when the person outside leaned against the door. A shadow covered the crack beneath it, broad enough to erase the moonlight. "The cabin is occupied," I called. My voice sounded thin against the heavy timber. No answer came at first. Cloth shifted over rough wood, followed by a controlled breath that ended in a low, pained rasp. "I can smell the blood," I said. "Move away from the door." A man answered, his voice deep but stripped of command. "Not all of it is mine." My fingers tightened around the knife. Through a narrow split beside the frame, I saw a black coat crusted with snow, one gloved hand braced against the wall, and dark blood staining the cloth near his shoulder. He was tall, pale beneath the moonlight, with damp black hair falling across his brow. His eyes lifted toward the crack, silver gray and unervingly steady. Power pressed through the door, not Garrick's hot, grasping dominance, but something colder and far larger, held under ruthless control. "Who are you?" I asked. He glanced toward the forest, listening to something beyond my hearing, then faced me again. "Ronan." Another drop struck the porch with a quiet pat. "That is all you need to know tonight." His palm flattened against the door, but he did not push. "Keep the knife, Elara Voss. Then decide whether you want me bleeding outside your door, or standing between you and what is coming through those trees. Step off the porch." My command passed through the door, while fire popped behind me, and smoke stung the back of my throat. I kept the rusted knife raised beside my cheek, its wooden handle rough against my damp palm. Ronan's shadow remained beneath the threshold. "You heard me," I said, back to the edge of the clearing, both hands where I can see them. For one long breath, nothing moved. The cabin's timber walls creaked in the cold, and meltwater tapped steadily into the tin cup near the hearth. Then leather scraped over wood. Through the narrow split beside the frame, I watched Ronan remove his palm from the door and descend one step. Then another. He stopped nearly 20 feet away, where moonlight silvered his black coat and the snow reached halfway up his boots. Both hands hung open at his sides. He could have shattered the latch. The certainty settled into my bones as plainly as the cold. Power rolled from him in restrained waves, making my wolf press close beneath my skin, yet he stood exactly where I had ordered him to stand. No alpha had ever yielded ground to me before. I shoved the broken table aside just far enough to crack the door 6 inches, bracing one foot against its base. Cold swept through the opening and fluttered my torn sleeve. "How do you know my name?" I heard Garrick's claiming bells. Ronan's gaze moved to the knife, then returned to my face. "And I crossed your trail before the pine covered it. That explains my scent. Not my name." His hunters were using it. A distant howl threaded between the firs. It was answered from farther south. Ronan turned his head, and the muscles along his jaw tightened. "For men," he said. "2 wolves. They split at the ravine and found the cloth you tied around your shoes." My stomach pulled tight. I had left one blood-specked strip snagged on a root when I climbed the western bank. The hunters had not found the cabin yet, but they had reclaimed my direction. "How long?" I asked. 10 minutes if they stay human. Less if they shift." Ronan bent slowly and drew a short sword from beneath his coat. The dark steel caught the moon, but instead of advancing, he laid it flat on the snow and pushed it toward the porch with his boot. Then he removed a second knife and dropped it beside the sword. "Those are the only weapons I carry. Your wolf is a weapon. So is yours." His voice held no mockery. "The difference is that I will not command you to use it." Another howl sounded, Closer now. Somewhere among the trees, a branch cracked beneath deliberate weight. I widened the door by an inch and pointed my knife toward the far side of the clearing. Move behind the woodpile. If this is a trick, I'll call out before they reach the cabin. Ronan obeyed at once, crossing through blue moonlight until stacked logs concealed half his body. The movement cost him. His injured shoulder sagged, and dark drops marked the snow behind his boots, sharp with the iron scent of blood. Still, he made no attempt to shorten the distance between us. A warm gust from the hearth touched my back, while the forest's cold breath pressed against my face. I had wanted walls no alpha could cross. Now the most powerful one I had ever since stood outside them, because I had said no. Ronan crouched, pressed 2 fingers to the ground, and looked toward the eastern trees. Amber lantern light flickered between the trunks. Voices followed, low and unmistakable. Garrick's hunters. Ronan rose without reaching for the weapons at my feet. Bar the door, Elara. His silver-gray eyes fixed on mine as the first hunting wolf growled beyond the clearing. They have your scent, and they will be here before that fire burns through its next log. Dark drops struck the snow beside the woodpile, each one vanishing into the white with a soft hiss. Lantern light slid between the eastern firs, brighter now, while the hunting wolf's growl vibrated through the frozen clearing. I could bar the door and leave Ronan outside as another trail for Garrick's men to follow. Instead, I kicked his surrendered weapons beneath the table, dragged the barricade aside, and pulled the door open. Inside. Now. Ronan crossed the clearing without argument. By the time he reached the porch, his left arm hung rigidly against his coat, and the iron scent rising from him overpowered the cedar smoke. He stopped at the threshold. Even with lanterns less than 100 yards away, he waited. You invited me to the door, he said quietly. Not across it. My grip tightened on the rusted knife. Garrick had treated hesitation as consent. Ronan treated permission as a boundary with edges. Cross, I said. Only then did he enter. I shut the door, dropped the iron latch, and shoved the table back into place. Outside, boots crushed the crusted snow. A man called my name from the trees, stretching it into a warning. Ronan turned toward the sound, but I caught his sleeve and forced him onto the cot. If you fall, you become another problem I have to solve. You should put out the fire, and let that wound freeze beneath your coat. I cut through the blood-stiffened fabric before he could answer. The knife exposed a deep gash across his upper shoulder, not fresh enough to come from Garrick's hunters. Heat radiated from his skin, startling against the cold room. I poured water from the kettle over a clean strip torn from the folded blanket, then pressed it firmly to the wound. Ronan's fingers closed around the cot frame. Wood creaked. He did not touch me. Hold this, I ordered. His hand replaced mine while I bound his shoulder. The moment my bare fingers brushed the skin below his collarbone, the cabin changed. A scent surged between us. Winter cedar, rain on stone, and something warm beneath both, like sunlight trapped inside wool. My wolf rose so sharply that my breath caught. Ronan's silver-gray eyes widened, and a low pulse of alpha power moved through the room. Not dominance. Recognition. The flame in the hearth bent toward us. Outside, both hunting wolves began to howl. Ronan looked at the gaps in the walls, then at my uncovered wrist. The bond scent, he said. They can smell it. My hand remained frozen against the bandage. Garrick's power had always felt like a fist pressing down. Ronan's filled the cabin like a vast door standing open, waiting for me to choose whether to cross. Only royal alpha blood carried that clean metallic undertone beneath a faded scent. Every Omega learned it before her first claiming ceremony. The stranger was not merely an alpha. He belonged to the highest bloodline in the realm. A fist struck the front door hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. Elara Voss, a hunter called. By Alpha Thorne's authority, open this door. Another lantern appeared beyond the rear window. Then another. Ronan rose, but I placed the rusted knife against his chest and forced him back one step. This was still my shelter. My choice. Outside, boots spread around all 4 walls while the bond scent poured through every crack, announcing that I was trapped inside with an alpha more powerful than Garrick. The door shuddered beneath a second blow. Open it, the hunter shouted, or we tear the cabin apart. Break the hinges. The command came through the wall as an axe bit into the front door, scattering pale splinters across the floor. Cedar smoke thickened beneath the rafters, and cold air hissed through the new crack. I snatched Ronan's sword from beneath the table and shoved the hilt into his hand. "There's a royal envoy 12 miles east," he said. "I can take you to them." Another blow bowed the timber inward. "So you rescue me, and I spend the rest of my life owing an alpha? You owe me nothing." Ronan pulled a small brass compass from his coat. The needle trembled east. "But this cabin will not survive." "Then stop deciding how I leave it." His gaze settled on mine. He gave one sharp nod. Outside, a hunter circled toward the rear door while a wolf clawed at the shutter. The drywood screeched, and Garrick's voice rose beyond the trees, carried through the pack bond by his men. "Surrender, Elara. Return before dawn, and I may forgive this disgrace." My hand tightened around the rusted knife until its worn handle pressed ridges into my palm. Going back would preserve my place in the pack, but not a single choice that belonged to me. Running east under Ronan's direction would keep me alive, yet it would still make my future another alpha's decision. I turned from both voices. The tin cup near the hearth had stopped ringing beneath the falling water. Its contents had vanished through a hairline seam between two floorboards. I kicked the cup aside, dropped to my knees, and drove the knife into the gap. "Elara," Ronan warned, listening to the hunters. "Not now." The boundary keeper needed a winter escape route. I levered upward. One plank lifted, releasing a breath of air that smelled of wet soil and iron. Ronan sheathed his sword and joined me, but waited until I pointed at the next board. Together we tore away 3 planks, uncovering stone steps descending into darkness. The axe struck again. The upper hinge split. A gloved hand reached through, feeling for the latch. Ronan moved toward it, power gathering around him like pressure before a storm. I caught his sleeve. "No, let them think we're trapped." I seized a burning cedar branch from the hearth, carried it to the opening, and descended first. The tunnel ceiling hung less than 5 feet above the ground. Frozen dirt scraped my shoulders, water dripped down my neck, and the torch filled the narrow passage with bitter smoke. Ronan followed, replacing the boards before the front door burst inward above us. Boots pounded across the cabin. "Find the Omega," someone shouted. "The scent ends here." I led Ronan through a fork where one passage sloped west toward Garrick's territory. I took the eastern branch instead. "The envoy is this way," Ronan said behind me. "I know. Then you accept my route?" I looked back at him through wavering orange light. His face had gone pale from blood loss, but he had placed every step inside my footprints rather than past me. "No," I said. "You accept mine." Above us, hunting wolves tore across the clearing toward the false western exit. Their howls faded in the wrong direction. I pushed deeper east, toward the royal envoy and the chance to confront Garrick under laws older than his authority. Behind me, Ronan followed without command or claim. The cabin had stopped being my hiding place. It was now the ground from which I had chosen to fight back. Then the tunnel groaned, and a heavy crack raced through the earth ahead. The torch flame flattened as the passage buckled with a roar. Dirt burst from the ceiling, filling my mouth with grit, and a support beam snapped somewhere behind us. I lunged forward as the floor tilted beneath my feet. Ronan's hand struck my back and sent me past the falling brace. Timber and frozen earth crashed between us. The torch vanished under the debris, leaving only a red seam of light and the sharp smells of smoke, wet clay, and splintered pine. "Ronan," I clawed at the mound. A beam shifted beneath my fingers, and his voice came through the dust. "Keep moving east. The exit is close." Above us, muffled impacts crossed the ground. Garrick's hunters had corrected their course. The narrow opening ahead carried clean winter air. I could crawl through it, reach the ravine, and run the remaining miles toward the royal envoy. Freedom waited less than 30 feet away. Behind me, Wood groaned. "Go, Elara." I wedged the rusted knife beneath a broken plank and leaned down with both hands. It rose an inch. Ronan's fingers appeared beneath it, scraped and coated in dust. "You chose my route," I said through clenched teeth. "You do not get to die on it." I braced one foot against the wall and pulled until the plank rolled aside. Ronan dragged himself free, his injured shoulder reopening beneath the bandage. The tunnel shuddered again. I hooked his arm around my neck and hauled him toward the eastern opening. Every step drove cold mud through my torn slippers. Behind us, voices spilled down the passage. Lantern light trembled across the rubble. We reached the final ladder, but Ronan's weight sagged against me. I pushed him upward first. He caught the rim and rolled into the snow outside. A hand closed around my ankle before I could follow. My chin struck the ladder rung. The rusted knife slipped from my grasp and disappeared below. I kicked backward, but another hunter seized my wrist and dragged me into the tunnel. Ronan turned at the opening. "Run!" I shouted. He did not. Instead, his thumb found the black iron ring on his right hand, the one I had mistaken for a plain band since he appeared at the cabin door. His silver-gray eyes locked on mine. Then he pulled it free. The change was immediate. Power flooded the tunnel, vast and cold, extinguishing one lantern and driving every wolf above into silence. The air tasted of lightning. Even the earth seemed to hold its breath. The hunter gripping me released my wrist and stumbled back. Ronan's hidden scent surged through the broken passage, no longer merely royal, but sovereign. It raced beyond the ravine in a wave strong enough to reach every sworn guard for miles. Horns answered from the eastern forest. 1, then 6 more. Garrick stepped into the lantern glow behind his men, snow melting across the shoulders of his dark cloak. His gaze moved from the ring in Ronan's palm to me. Before Ronan could descend, Garrick caught my arm and pulled me against his side. "One step closer," he said, "and she pays for it." Ronan remained above the opening, blood darkening his coat, while unleashed authority pressed every hunter toward his knees. I had traded my open path for his life. Now Garrick held my freedom in one hand, while Ronan had surrendered the secret that had kept his true power hidden. Through the trees, mounted riders thundered closer beneath the call of royal horns. Garrick tightened his grip and looked toward the sound. For the first time, the man holding me was no longer the strongest alpha in the clearing. Hooves shattered the silence, throwing snow against the fir trunks as 12 mounted guards entered the clearing. Their dark blue cloaks snapped in the wind, each fastened with a silver wolf beneath a crown. Garrick dragged me backward, his forearm locked across my ribs. Leather pressed against my throat, carrying the bitter scent of smoke and sweat. The riders dismounted as one, boots striking the frozen ground in a single heavy beat. Their commander saw Ronan above the tunnel opening. His sword dropped into the snow. "Your Majesty." Every royal guard sank to one knee. Heads bowed, fists pressed over hearts. Even Garrick's hunters folded under the sovereign force filling the clearing, knees cracking against the ice, while their lanterns swung from trembling hands. Garrick remained upright behind me, but his breath came shallow against my hair. Ronan descended from the tunnel rim, one measured step at a time. Blood had soaked through the bandage at his shoulder, yet the clearing seemed to arrange itself around him. The stranger who had waited outside my door now carried the stillness of a throne room. "Alpha King Ronan Vale," the commander said. The name passed through Garrick's men like a cold current. Garrick's hold loosened by half an inch. I drove my heel into his boot and tore free. 2 royal guards moved between us before he recovered, but Ronan lifted one hand. "Do not touch him unless he resists." His voice was quiet. Every wolf obeyed. Garrick stared at the iron ring in Ronan's palm. "You entered my territory without a royal banner. A banner changes what people permit themselves to be seen doing." Ronan's gaze shifted to the hunters, the broken tunnel, then the bruised skin around my wrist. "For 4 months, I have traveled without my crown or scent, documenting pacts that use claiming law to turn consent into ceremony." Wind stirred the open edges of his ruined coat. Tonight, Garrick Thorne provided the final testimony himself. "She is my Omega," Garrick snapped. The sovereign pressure sharpened. Snow slipped from the branches overhead, and Garrick finally dropped to one knee, not in reverence, but because his legs could no longer hold him. "No person is property," Ronan said. He crossed the clearing toward me, then stopped 3 paces away, the same distance I had demanded outside the cabin. His soldiers watched. Garrick watched. The faded scent between us moved through the cold air, cedar and rain-washed stone, unmistakable to every wolf present. A murmur rose among the hunters. Royal blood had found its mate. By the old custom Garrick worshipped, Ronan could have spoken one sentence and made my future untouchable. He could have claimed me before them all. Instead, he lowered his sword and placed it on the snow. Then he removed the silver clasp from his cloak, the visible seal of his crown, and set that beside it. King and Alpha stood before me without weapon or emblem. Elara Voss, he said. Garrick's authority over you ends now. Garrick made a strangled sound behind the guards. Ronan did not turn toward him. His silver-gray eyes remained on mine. My scent gives me no right that you have not freely granted. My rank gives me no answer you have not chosen to speak. The wind pushed cold strands of hair across my mouth. I brushed them aside, feeling every gaze in the clearing settle on the Omega who had been ordered to kneel only hours earlier. Ronan extended an empty hand, palm upward, but did not close the distance. You ran because an alpha decided what you would become, he said. I will not decide what happens next. His hand remained steady between us. Tell me what you want, Elara. I want every wolf here to hear me. My words crossed the clearing as the royal banners snapped above bowed heads, and lantern oil smoked in the cold. I did not take Ronan's offered hand. Instead, I stepped past it and climbed onto the broken rim of the tunnel, where Garrick's hunters could see the bruises on my wrist and the torn white sleeve he had gripped before the claiming stone. Garrick lifted his head between the guards. Think carefully, Elara. Accuse your alpha, and Thorne territory will never shelter you again. The warning reached beyond the night. I saw my small room above the packed kitchens, my winter cloak hanging beside its stove, every familiar face turning away if I returned. Home had already become a price Garrick expected me to pay for speaking. I faced the Royal Guard commander. At the ritual, I refused Garrick Thorne. He seized me anyway. He ordered me to kneel so he could declare a claim before witnesses, then sent hunters when I escaped. My voice scraped at first, but I forced each word into the open. His elders watched. His pack obeyed. If I return under his law, I return as property. One of Garrick's hunters lowered his lantern. Another stared at the snow. Garrick surged to his feet, but the guards crossed their spears before him. She is an Omega-defying pack order. Yes, I said. I defy it. The wind cut through my torn dress, carrying cedar, steel, and Ronan's rain-dark scent. I looked at the men who had tracked me through 4 miles of forest. I surrender my place in Thorne Pack. I surrender its roof, its name, and every protection tied to silence. I testified before the crown that Garrick used claiming custom to erase my refusal. The commander drew a narrow ledger from his saddlebag. His pen scratched across the page. Ink made the choice permanent. Ronan bent, retrieved the silver clasp from the snow, and fixed it to his ruined coat. When he straightened, the wounded stranger was gone from his posture, though not from his eyes. Commander, record a sovereign decree, he said. From this hour, no claiming in this realm is lawful without clear consent spoken freely by both wolves. Rank, family agreement, debt, and pack order cannot replace it. The commander wrote while the guards listened. Ronan turned toward Garrick. Garrick Thorne, your authority as Alpha is revoked. Your territory will remain under royal stewardship until its wolves choose new leadership. You will stand public judgment for coercion, unlawful pursuit, and defiance of consent. The guards removed Garrick's bronze Alpha clasp. Its pin made a small metallic click against the ice. No struggle followed. There was nothing left for him to command. Ronan then faced me. The bond sent tightened between us, warm beneath the freezing air, but he remained 3 paces away. My riders can give you safe passage anywhere in the realm, he said. Not necessarily with me. A faint line formed between his brows as he held my gaze. Fate may explain why I found your door. It cannot decide whether you ever open another one to me. He ordered the commander to provide me with a horse, provisions, and written royal protection bearing my name alone. No mate designation, no pack ownership, no debt. Then Ronan stepped aside, leaving an unobstructed path toward the waiting horses. Garrick had lost his title. The old law had lost its power. I had lost the only home I had known. Yet Ronan refused to turn that emptiness into leverage. Dawn silvered the eastern branches as I accepted the reins from the commander, not Ronan's hand. Where will you go? He asked. I looked west, toward the ruined cabin whose threshold he had refused to cross without permission. Somewhere the door belongs to me. By spring, the hammer's rhythm had replaced the claiming bells in my dreams. Sunlight warmed the cabin's new cedar walls, and fresh-cut boards left the air sweet with resin. I rebuilt the broken threshold first. Then came a stronger roof for narrow beds, and a blue-painted sign offering shelter to any Omega who needed one. The royal protection bearing my name hung beside the hearth, not as permission to live there, but but as a warning to anyone who believed they could choose for me. For 3 months, Ronan sent lumber, grain, and medicine through the royal guard commander. Every crate arrived without conditions. Ronan did not. His absence became another boundary he honored. When 3 measured knocks sounded one evening, I stopped with a kettle suspended over the fire. Rain whispered against the windows, and wet earth scented the warm room. No frightened traveler was expected that night. I crossed the floor and looked through the clear pane I had installed beside the door. Ronan stood alone beneath the eaves. No soldiers waited among the trees. No crown rested on his dark hair. A healed line showed above the collar of his plain black coat, and rainwater ran from his shoulders onto the porch I had built with my own hands. I kept the latch in place. "Why are you here?" "Because I wanted to see you." His voice carried through the wood, quiet and unadorned. "Wanting does not give you entry." "No." Ronan took one step back, leaving the threshold entirely. "That is why I knocked." The bond stirred beneath my ribs, warm and familiar, but it no longer felt like a command written into my blood. It was only a possibility. "You could lose support at court," I said. "Some alphas will never accept a king whose mate lives beyond his palace and keeps her own name. Then I may lose their support." His hand rested at his side, empty. "I abolished forced claiming because it was wrong, not because it would make ruling easier." "And if I never become your Luna?" Rain tapped the roof between us. Ronan's jaw tightened once before he answered. "Then you will still be Elara Voss, and I will still be grateful that you lived." No royal decree could have cost him what those words did. He had come prepared to leave without my hand, my bond, or the future fate had shown him. The last time Ronan stood at this door, he had offered protection while blood darkened the snow. Now he offered nothing except the truth, and accepted that it might not be enough. I lifted the iron latch. The door swung inward, releasing firelight and the scent of cedar into the rain. Ronan did not move. "I have conditions," I said. "The cabin remains mine. This shelter remains open. My name remains mine. Yes." No command replaces a conversation. No crown enters before the man wearing it. "Yes." I extended my hand across the threshold. "And if I choose you, it is because I choose you today, not because fate found us first." Ronan looked at my palm, then at my face. Only when I curled my fingers toward him did he cross the porch. His hand settled into mine, warm and careful. I drew him inside and closed the door against the rain. Not to hide, not to surrender, but to begin. The Alpha King had once arrived at my door as destiny. He entered it only when I chose him as love.